Hello, everyone. This is Sierra Rose Typology with my lovely guest, Celeste, or as I know her as I know her as Kia. So if you want to just introduce yourself.
Yeah. So have like nine names that I go by because what is identity? I don't know. It's a weird thing that's in flux all the time. We can talk about that
It's a
later.
construct.
Uh, right, it's a construct. And I have multiple little boxes constructed depending on who's perceiving me at any given time. But yeah, my work name, I guess, what I go by in more spiritual businessy spaces is Celeste. You can find me online at celestemott.com and Celeste Mott on Instagram, Celeste Moth on TikTok. If you want to see me try and do trends with the young kids and fail epically and embarrass myself, it's always fun. But yeah, Sierra knows me as Kia. That's my kind of name I go by as a normal person. And I am a spiritual worker. So my full-time job is tarot reader, psychic, witch, spiritual consultant. I do mentorship for people in the realm of like, I guess like I'm kind of trying to rebrand it a little bit, not so much as like hard occultism, although I do consider myself an occultist, but I'm sort of trying to take it in the direction of like weird stuff. Do you have weird problems? Is there weird stuff happening to you? Maybe I can help you. And so I do that kind of thing. And I've been doing that full time for about like 5 years totally full time solo, but about 7 years um as a whole. And then I've been practicing all this stuff for almost my whole life. So yeah.
Okay. You're a very spiritual person. One could even say a seeker,
Yeah.
which is kind of the crux of this episode. And I had the extreme fortune of meeting Kia. Is it okay if I call you Kia?
Yeah, totally. Mhm.
Okay. In a typology server where we were both recently typed, we were both nine wing ones, SOSX, and a little bit different in our fixes, but I feel like we connected really quickly just over being both nines and SOSX.
Mhm. Which was funny too, like because there was such a debate initially about my SOSX-ishness. And I feel like there was some sorry if I don't know if that's really loud in the background, but the my partner, who is like the way that I came into typology in the first place, in earnestness, felt that I was social self-pres. And that's kind of what I had been operating under the assumption of. And I'm still not 100% sure, but I think like folks in that server and you know, talking to you as well, I think there is a very solid case for social sexual in my case. So the jury is out internally, but it's making more sense as time goes on.
Okay. I mean, if it helps at all, that's how I think of you.
It does help. It does. And
Yeah.
that's what it's all about, right? It's like you get the feedback because you can't really see yourself um super accurately all the time.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's different to like watch someone's typing video versus actually engaging with them in real time, because then that's when you, especially with instincts, like certain things like, and this is all like self-dependent. It's like how you might vibe or not vibe with someone. And
Yeah.
so like I still feel like I'm learning about the instincts a lot, but one thing with like SOSX is like there's this real, especially with nine, core nine, there's like this real free spirit, like the vibiness of nine is like cranked up to 1,000. So
Hmm.
like I think we connected and then we were just like chatting like old best friends, like right away, which is awesome. Like I love that.
Yeah, I really, you know, it's always fun for me, and I think I said this to you, you know, one on one, but when that nine-ish urge to just sort of like flow and merge a little bit, but also just sort of like in a playful way, um, in a way where you know, I guess like in a sometimes that can verge on oversharing, but like when you have someone who's meeting that energy though, and you're just volleying it back and forth, it's really nice when you get to that point, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's definitely like what I felt from you. Like you're funny, but you can also switch gears really quick and like let's talk about deep stuff and it was kind of odd because we were finding we had a lot of weird coincidental things. Just odd stuff that I won't mention, but just found out today as I'm trying to like get this podcast started that you're also not only a seeker in the sense that you're seeking to your whole your livelihood is actually very like seeker coded. You're a spiritual healer and mentor and an artist and a writer. So, but also I found out that you're into like high strangeness. So
Mhm.
I'm kind of curious about how you got into all of that.
Yeah, yeah, which was it was such a cool point in our conversation earlier. Like this call is so like apropos of nothing. We kind of out of nowhere we were like, "Oh man, we gotta we gotta hop on a call and talk about this and record it." But yeah, the high strangeness journey for me was interesting because I've been in all these spaces online that have been sort of adjacent to the high strangeness realm for a really long time.
Okay.
Um, I think, if you're in the witchcraft community or in the occult community, there's overlap. But as you probably know, as someone who kind of has that fascination and enjoyment of ufology and like cryptids and Bigfoot and stuff, even though magic and the occult and spirituality share a lot in common with that paranormal, high strangeness, cryptid realm, sometimes those two communities really are at odds with each other. And I think it's because a lot of the paranormal community has this real, like, broy, like, pseudoscience bent where they're like, we're going to go and ghost hunt and we have all our little gadgets and we're science. And so those folks are often like magic. Now, none of that. That's not, we're serious scientists here with our little beeping machines. We don't want any of that. But in 2020, this really interesting thing happened where I think, so much was popping off in 2020 because we were all locked in our houses and going crazy.
Right.
But a lot of these communities started butting up against each other in ways where there was less hostility and less like factionalism and more an interest in kind of learning from each other and overlapping a wee bit. So I kind of came into the high strangeness space through this documentary series called Hellier, which I was telling you about earlier. I was like, oh man, if you haven't seen this, you have to watch it. And if anyone is watching this and they're interested in such topics, I highly recommend it. Um, Hellier is interesting because it is a cryptid, high strangeness, paranormal documentary, but it also includes these streams of like occultism and mysticism and Jungian, archetypes. And I mean, the whole thing is really a meditation on synchronicity. So that was kind of my crossover point. And then from there, I just had a really wacky 4 years where I was really entrenched in that community for a while, experiencing a lot of weird stuff on this interesting journey with people that I had met online. And it culminated in some folks that I had met on that part of the journey. We all went to Mount Shasta, California to kind of,
Oh,
yeah, to see if we could
okay.
like get abducted by aliens or something. We were like, yeah, let's see what happens. We did not,
I love
spoilers,
it. Oh,
unfortunately, get
sad,
abducted,
sad.
bummer. But yeah, so that was kind of my entry point. And then since then, I've had much more of a sort of personal overlap, I guess, between my work, which previously was much more like in the occult stream, and
Hmm.
stuff that I would call high strangeness. I've been much more interested in Bigfoot phenomena, fairy phenomena, the ways in which all these things do seem to cross over. And oh man, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying not to like big brain this and like suddenly like zap off in 75 different directions, but I have so many thoughts.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. This is why I was like, I want to get you on a call and we can talk about this. Of course, through like the loose lens of typology and like the fact that we're both nines and we're both seekers and we're both into it. And I don't know about you, but like one of my greatest irritations are like I call them the poo-pooers, the people who like dismiss things out of hand. Like there has to be a logical explanation for everything. And I'm just like, oh my God, you know?
Yeah, it's a bummer. Although I think like because I have people like that in my life for sure. And I think for me, it comes down to also like, well, yeah, there might be a logical explanation, but that doesn't mean that it's not also paranormal or supernatural. Like a lot of these things to me are just things that we don't understand yet, that we don't have the framework or the scientific like equation to solve. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever I butt up against a poo-pooer, I'm like, bro, we're not
Right.
even really talking different languages. We're just like talking different dialects.
Mm-hmm.
We're not necessarily in disagreement, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's also just a fundamental difference between like exploring things with like an openness and even like kind of like a childlike excitement of like what if,
Mhm.
everything isn't discovered or like accounted for. And like I don't know about you, but I think it's possible that like I've heard some stories where Bigfoot, we'll just get right into the weird stuff because why not? Bigfoot could be like popping in and out of dimensions
Oh
because
yeah, that's
I've
my
heard
favorite.
I've heard things about him like he'll appear and then he'll disappear. And then there's other like obviously Bigfoot himself is like supernatural, but other supernatural phenomena associated with Bigfoot.
Yep.
So I tend to think that there's a bug in here. I tend to think that it's all related.
Hmm.
Right, like aliens, Bigfoot. I just heard something recently that they actually got some Bigfoot hairs and tested them and found that the maternal genes were actually hu of human origin, and the
Interesting.
paternal line of genes was unknown. So I'm thinking, could these things be a hybrid?
I was gonna say now we're getting into like Nephilim
Yeah.
territory. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's where
Um,
you want to take it. But yeah, that's kind of the latest thing I've been um interested in. Like where are these cryptids coming from? And obviously the phenomena is like all around the world, right? So
mhm.
it's not just like some hick somewhere just like getting drunk on the weekends and putting on a gorilla suit to scare hikers. There's
Right.
a lot more going on. So I'll just let you share some thoughts.
Yeah, no, I love the idea. I came across that sort of Bigfoot is an interdimensional being theory probably sometime in like 2020 or 2021 because prior to that, my only exposure to that kind of stuff, I mean, I was interested in cryptids and stuff, but honestly, I hadn't really looked too much into Bigfoot. I think mostly because Bigfoot really it's the cryptid that if you bring it up, most people are going to be like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, you know,
I mean, it's kind of a meme. It's on like bumper
yeah.
stickers and yeah.
Yeah. So I had, it's not that I had totally like discarded it, but in my brain it was relegated to that place of like, okay, a bit of an eye roll. I
Okay.
was much more interested in Mothman. I'm a big Mothman fan. Um, it's that movie, The Mothman Prophecies, has like embedded itself in my teenage brain.
Mhm.
But I came across that interdimensional being theory of Bigfoot in around 2020, and I was like, oh man, that makes so much sense, actually. Like I
Yeah.
realized like the lady with the like goth bangs and the weird glasses is like, yes, it makes perfect sense that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being. I understand I'm a meme right now, okay? But
Yeah.
like it that idea um is fascinating to me. And there's a really awesome book that I highly recommend. You've probably come across it already because I know you're interested in this stuff. But there's a French, I want to say he's a computer scientist. His name's Jacques Vallée, and he wrote a bunch of books about the phenomena, but he's written a particular one that's really, really good. It's called Passport to Magonia, and he kind of tracks the similarities in all of these narratives, alien abduction narratives. He touches on Bigfoot a little bit, I think, but mostly he talks about UFO encounters, fairy encounters in like Ireland and Europe in the 1800s, and then religious encounters, encounters with like manifestations of the Virgin Mary or angel encounters. And he says if you look at the narrative beats of all of these stories, um, again, like you said, told by people all over the world, folks who don't have any cultural connection to each other. He's like, the beats are the same. The narrative structure of these encounters is the same. And he said, his overarching theory is that it's all the same phenomena. It's the same or a similar kind of interdimensional energy that's
Mhm.
popping through into our world and choosing how it manifests depending on the cultural lens or the lens of the person perceiving. And that's to me where shit gets fascinating. And I think
Yeah.
Bigfoot is on in that same wheelhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like as common as like alien encounters, whether it's like a UFO sighting or like a straight up abduction, I feel like the Bigfoot encounters are even more frequent,
Yeah.
almost common. Like so many people, like if you go to certain parts of the United States, you might bring up Bigfoot and you're not going to get an eye roll. You're going to be like, oh yeah, you saw Bigfoot too. Like, you
Yeah. 100%. Have you ever encountered Bigfoot? Tell me, I want to hear your stories. That's like I was so stoked to have this
Oh,
call.
okay.
I know you have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not really like a deep woods camper type of girl, so I haven't encountered Bigfoot yet. I'd actually be kind of frightened because from all the accounts I've read, the Bigfoots seem kind of cranky and territorial. They like to throw things, right? They like to throw
Yeah.
rocks and um I have had an alien encounter though. And when you said about how the way we might encounter or experience these things is like kind of like contextual of our, whatever like society we're living in. And that's part of the reason why that aspect of it that I got into it because I had had an encounter when I was a young child, but
Mhm.
it like as I got older, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like to my logical mind. So I kind of put it on the shelf. But then years later, I listened to another woman's story, and she had been like abducted many, many times. And she said sometimes they would come into her room, but they would like cloak themselves. Like either they're projecting an image into your mind or they're able to shapeshift, which I'm sure we could talk about shapeshifters too. But they like she remembered one looking like Ronald McDonald. And it
Yeah.
reminded me of my encounter. So when I was a child, one of my earliest memories is being really terrified at night. Like I'd be so terrified, I'd be like frozen in fear. And I
Mhm.
would sit there for who knows how long trying to like work up the courage to like launch myself out of my bed and like sprint to my parents' room and like, get under the covers as fast as possible. But I remember even after I would get into my parents' bed, I would still often feel very afraid, like there was something in the hallway.
Yep.
So then one night when I was maybe like 5 or 6, this whole thing plays out. I go running down to my parents' room down the hallway, and there is this large alien entity blocking my path. And the really odd thing about it was that it looked just like the character from E.T., the Steven Spielberg movie, the E.T. alien, but it was taller and it had like a neck that was like an accordion that could like extend out and come back in.
Mm.
And I was thinking about it as an adult and I was like, I got the feeling like it was almost taunting me because it was like blocking my path to my parents' bedroom. And obviously like messing with me, doing its creepy little neck thing. And then I realized like I don't have a memory after that. Like I don't know if I got abducted or like, but I always I wasn't really afraid of a lot as a kid, but I always was very, very frightened, but also intrigued by aliens. Because I think I knew in the back of my mind that they were real because I had encountered them, and that's the one time I could remember. I mean, who knows how many times it happened because a lot of people get like the UFO brain fog where things get hazy, you lose time. But I do know, like, I have that core childhood memory of being terrified,
Mhm.
as if it was happening habitually and then encountering that thing. And then so when I kind of was entertaining this a few years ago, I got online and there was like a whole Reddit thread about other people who had seen this thing, this like ET looking alien. So yeah, that was my story.
Damn, dude.
Yeah, and I could make it even weirder and be like, well, is it possible that Steven Spielberg knows about these things and they put it in the movie to make it like less frightening for a young child that they might go with them more willingly? I don't know. just speculation.
Yeah, I have who I we're gonna have to do like a series, I
Oh,
think,
it'll
like
be a series. It's
so
gonna happen.
Kia Celeste Sierra Supernatural Power Hour. Because I have so many thoughts. Yeah, so first of all, I said to you, when we were talking privately, but I also have experiences from being a kid where nothing quite as like vivid as that, but definitely I've had experiences as a child where as an adult I've been like, wait a second, like, was there like an abductee type of experience or was something happening? I can deeply relate to that, just that terror of being awake in your bed at night. I was actually thinking about this the other night. I was running from my bed to my mom's room to sleep in the bed with her until I was like 18.
Oh wow.
Just terrified of sleeping
Mhm.
in my own bed. And that visceral fear of like the walk or the run from like your room to your parents' room. And that was yeah, lifelong for me. Really until I was solidly like a young adult. And I don't know that I ever saw anything really that I can remember, but a couple of weird things did happen that I do remember. One is that when I was very young, probably like probably about 5 or 6, I was staying at my uncle's house. It was like my mom was staying there too. We were just like visiting or whatever. And I was in this bedroom with my younger cousin who was still in a crib. So I must have been pretty young. She would have been like a baby. And I remember waking up in the night and there just being not silence, but like an absence of sound. Like
Okay.
the room that I was in was like everything had been sucked out
Oh,
of the room. And I remember thinking it was weird because the room typically had quite a bit of noise. The parents were like out in the kitchen and chattering. The baby monitor was going off, the baby was like making little noises and there was suddenly just nothing. And I remember standing up in the crib or the bed that I was sleeping in and looking out the window and seeing a UFO. Like I saw it landing. And it was like in the distance, it wasn't super close, but I think I was old enough for sure to know the difference between like an airplane and like something that wasn't an airplane. And I remember watching this happen, and then there was just light coming through the window. And I think I was trying to talk to my younger cousin about what was going on. And then she just started screaming. And then suddenly everything kind of like zoomed back into focus. There was sound in the room again. The parents were running in the room. They were like, why is the baby crying? And I'm like, I saw a thing. They're like, shut up, go back to
oh
sleep. Like,
no.
no,
Oh my
you didn't.
God.
No, you didn't.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
and there was like another instance kind of like that where I saw something out the back window of a car when I was a kid. And then, round about when I was about 14 or 15, I started having, and this was quite long lived, maybe like 5 or 6 years of this. I started having these situations where I would wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night with this horrifying knowledge that something had been removed from my brain.
Oh
Like,
wow.
just, I would wake up and know that something had been there that wasn't there anymore, that I had had like a memory removed. And it was almost like, that feeling where you have had a dream and you wake up and you're like, oh man, I know I had a dream, but what was it? It was kind of that feeling, but accompanied by a very visceral sense of dread. Um,
Wow.
and this was so pervasive and it went on for so long that I actually went to see my family doctor and I was like, do I have a neurological problem?
Mm-hmm.
Like, can we, do I need a brain scan? Like, what's going on? Because this is really scary. Um, and eventually that just subsided and went away. But instances like that, some other stuff that happened to me over the course of my life that I've over the course of my life framed in like different ways. But I definitely think like something was going on. I don't know what it is,
Mm-hmm.
but it's it's something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it almost seems like, yeah, something was happening because like you had the body response to it, even if
Mhm.
like, say the memories had been wiped. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is I mean, I'm currently, or I have been since February on TikTok talking, like doing this like long video series about a sort of internet cult that I was involved in when I was a teenager and up until my young adult years. Um, and that sort of intersects with some of my sort of paranormal experiences as well. So it's been weird for me because over the course of my life, I've been trying to figure out what to do with these things that definitely did happen, these like perceptions or experiences that, they happened in some sense. Like, you want to be like a poo-poo bro and put your little science hat on and be like, well, where's your evidence? Like, yeah, okay. There are some rational explanations. I could just be crazy. I do lucid dream, like all of these other things, right?
Yeah.
But one way or another, if we're perceiving it, if you perceive that you were scared as a kid and trying to get to your parents' room and you encountered this like concertina or neck ET thing, that
Hmm.
happened on some level.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so I've come to the point where I'm like, I'm not sure I even care about what like the answer is. If it's a perception that I had and an experience I had, that I still have to like figure out internally what to do with that.
Yeah.
But over the years, I've come to view these things in different ways. Every time I learn a little bit of new information, I kind of like file that away and I try and figure out what to do with it. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of us out there who've had these weird experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of the thing too. It's like, yeah, for years I was like, well, I have this weird memory, but it doesn't make sense. And then I think as you get older, there is like a degree of like giving yourself permission, like maybe this stuff really did happen, like, because I do think that if you have like an experience that's like that deeply impacts you, that's what you tend to remember. So if it was
Yeah.
some like figment or some like you had a bad dream, you couldn't remember it, like why would we be here today talking about it, you know?
Yep. And I think, we were talking about how to connect this to typology. Am I, um, the part of the house that I'm in has like the worst Wi-Fi in the whole house, of course, um, naturally. But yeah, we were talking about the typology aspect and whether or not there is as you said, like the seeker archetype, right? But a nine-ishness about the permeability of, I mean, what I would call, I guess, permeability of spirit.
Mhm,
Um, I would imagine it. I'm pretty new to typology, right? So I'm like definitely not putting an expert hat on, but it makes sense to me that some personality types are going to be more rigid and more like a kind of like polished glass rebuffing the phenomena or rebuffing, like spiritual energy. And then there are going to be types that are more permeable. And
mhm,
something that I've been told over and over again, by occultists, by spiritual workers that I consult, is that spiritually and energetically, I am very permeable. And it wasn't kind of said as a compliment. It was said like, you girl, you gotta, you gotta get your shit together because you're so porous and you're so
yeah.
open. Um, and I think that could be typological. I mean, it makes sense for nine for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. And I also wonder if like having SP in your instinct is also like more of a barrier. So if
Mm,
you're like SOSX and a nine, like I feel like that's probably about as like open to spiritual phenomena as one can be. That's just my my own little theory.
yeah, I would love to know, like, and you probably have thoughts on this because you're way more typologically knowledgeable than I am by millions of thousands of years. But I wonder if it's the case, not that certain types are not spiritual, but that spirituality just is going to manifest very differently for different
Hmm.
types.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like because I'm thinking like I'm in a couple of different group chats right now in the typology world. And a lot of those groups have people in them that are still they're still spiritual people, but that spirituality maybe channels more through like a really rigid adherence to like religious doctrine.
Mhm.
So I'm not at all anti-religion by any means. Like I am a baptized Catholic, I go to church, but I think there's like an engagement with that type of spirituality that can be very like rule following and like doctrinal and
Fixes.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course there's the kind of the embodied experience of spiritualities. There's the conspiracy theory, cryptid phenomena part of spirituality.
Yeah.
You're interesting though too, though, because you are a Christian. How do you reconcile that with the like the cryptid conspiracy stuff?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, it's not hard for me to reconcile, but I mean, I've got a seven fix in my head center, so I've always been like curious about all the weird stuff, and I
Mhm.
didn't necessarily see that as problematic. Like last winter, I read the Book of Enoch,
Yes.
which is super, yeah. So I'm like, it's like if I'm a Christian, I believe like the Genesis narrative. I believe that these supernatural entities came to Earth, producing the Nephilim. And then
Mhm.
for me, it's just kind of like a curiosity of like, well, how is what remains of their presence felt in this day? Are they somehow like even just like the spiritual or actual physical descendants of or yeah, ancestors, whatever, of the like the Bigfoot or the Yeti or the Tek or all around the world, like was that some sort of a like Nephilim science experiment? Like is that why they're abducting people to like grow these creatures in a lab underground somewhere, like all the cryptids. So yeah, I mean I don't really view it as problematic. It actually fits quite neatly into my worldview as a Christian that like the world is a supernatural place. And I
Mhm.
believe that we're obviously living in the physical realm, but there's overlap with the spiritual realm or the spiritual dimension. And some people maybe nines are just a lot more sensitive and open because I do think that nine of like all the energies of the Enneagram type, we're very soft
Mhm.
and like Lazy Legend, Larissa Server calls it being skinless, and we're just kind of like receiving antennas for
Yeah.
like we're just like I feel like we're just like beacons, like spiritual beacons, and like we are a spirit that's in a body. And actually, even before I kind of learned that there was like a scientific thing behind this, but I felt intuitively that my energy field, like my heart energy extends like way beyond my body.
Mhm.
And so I've even gotten paranoid, speaking of being a little bit crazy, that people can read my thoughts because I feel like I'm sometimes blasting my thought outs or like my emotional state is just absolutely radiating outside of my body. Like,
Mhm.
because there's something about nine that's just like, we're not super contained, we're a gut type, but we're not really in the gut. We're kind of just like floating and just like moving with like the spiritual tides around us. And sometimes it feels like being at mercy
Mhm.
and at the mercy of, and that's maybe part of the reason why I want to understand what's out there because I am impacted by it. It's like
Yeah.
I'm impacted by like a physical thing in my way. I could run into it. I'm impacted by all this like the spiritual stuff around me. So I don't know if you relate to any of that.
Oh, 100%. We were talking earlier about how that can manifest maybe, as what some people might call like being psychic even, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
because not only are you broadcasting probably more than other people, because yeah, there's no skin, there's a diminished boundary, so you're projecting, but you're also picking it up constantly.
Right.
I think for me that's a big part of the reason that I don't leave my house a lot, um because it's just too much. Like I don't go to parties, I don't hang out in large groups of people because they don't have to tell me anything. I walk in and I can tell who's pissed off at who and who wants to fuck who, and it's all this like noisy, gross soup of energy. And my poor little like porous body is like, stop it. Like I don't want it in me. Eh. There's the four as well, being like, no, don't want it. Um, the four in my tri-type maybe. But yeah, I don't know. That's a good question for you, actually. Do you think that is there a manifestation of nine, or like nines with, I mean, how do you experience this, I guess? Do you ever want that? Is there ever this desire to be like, oh, I'm super porous and I have no skin and I want to absorb, or not?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, there can be an element of that. Um, like I am really particular like you about the environments that I'm in because they do like deeply impact me. So I make a point to like get out into the woods and hike with my dog whenever possible.
Mm.
And I also like kind of control the energy I'm taking in by like I'm always listening to something. Like I've got my earbuds in and listening to music so I can like kind of psychically block out the incoming energy. Um, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I was wondering if like I'm trying to think if I can pinpoint any nines in my life who are just like, yes, let me suck up all the juice. Uh,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's extremely context dependent because if I'm around people I really love, it's
mm,
great being super porous and like I feel a lot of joy talking to people that I like you. It's really enjoyable when you're around like a good energy, but like if you're around someone who's giving off a lot of bad energy, it's rough. Like I will avoid people, I will hide. I'll be like you, don't leave my house a whole lot because I feel like safe and protected, kind of like in the energy sense of energy sense of that, where if you were like you're gonna go like you have to go to Walmart and get a few things, it's like an attack on like
yeah.
every part of you, and it takes a lot out of you.
That's why I do grocery delivery. I'm like, they can bring the stuff to me. I don't want to have to go out there. For me, it's weird too, though, because like even people I really like, I have to be in such a I have to prepare, I feel like. I have to be in a kind of hyper specific mood, even though I know that I'm going to really enjoy an interaction or absorbing that energy. I think it takes me such a long time to process what I've already absorbed that I find myself, in my little like bed cave, bed rotting in the dark for like long periods of time, and then moving myself into a like a mental and an energetic state where I'm ready to go and like absorb again is it's kind of a task. Like I have to kind of like pep talk myself and amp myself up and like kind of like you're talking about like putting your music on to kind of create that shield. I have to do that to like amp myself up to do things that I know I'm going to enjoy. I'm like, when I'm there, I'm going to be having a great time, but I have to, the gear shift, I guess, is
Yeah.
tough for me. And I think some of that actually is it kind of links back to the spiritual stuff and the experience of what I would call like this, the subtle realm or the supernatural realm or the stuff that's all around us at all times, but we're not perceiving it with our regular senses. So much of that is coming at me all the time. I've been a lucid dreamer since I was like a baby.
Mhm.
I've never had to work at it. It's just there. I do so much shit while I'm asleep that I will wake up and my feet will be sore because it feels like I've been like running around over there. And I think because of all of that, having to get up in the morning or the afternoon in my case, and engage with the regular human world, it feels like I'm doing two jobs and I'm like tired all the time. It's a
Yeah.
massive pain in the ass, but it's the curse. Got to do it.
Mhm. Yeah. And I feel like there's an element where you're, like you said, like you're taking in all the stimuli. And I feel like the nine processing style is like, it's very slow and it kind of flows in waves.
Mm.
And like you need your time to get alone or like you said, psych yourself up because you know you're going to be like intaking a lot and it's going to take you time to sort through it.
Do you think that these beings, whatever they are, if we call them like, I would call them ultra terrestrials or interdimensional beings, those are terms that I hear used a lot, right? Um, do you think they have a sense of like types of people that they are looking for in terms of
Yeah.
like abduction or interaction?
Yeah, I do.
Tell me more.
Um, I remember reading somewhere about things that they might be looking for, like the types of people that tend to get abducted. I think that they specifically target children and probably children that are more open, maybe like, gifted in the traditional.
You're back. Am I back? Are we
You're
back?
back, you're back. Okay.
Hey, perfect.
Yeah,
It's every time we talk specifically about aliens, they're like, no, let's F with the
it's catching
connection.
up. That's true. Yeah, so I would, I feel like we have a lot of commonalities that we're both really open and we've experienced supernatural or psychic phenomena and also, like gifted as children. So I do wonder if some people are more inherently susceptible and that's what they're looking for. Do you have any
I
thoughts?
think it has to be. Yeah, well, I think you're right. And I think it is interesting that it happens a lot to kids. And children too, that most of the stories you hear about recollections of past lives or kids talking about, I talked to grandma and grandma's been dead for like 20 years. It tends to be little kids. And I think it's because children generally haven't been taught to construct reality in this very like rigid way. As we grow, I work with clients a lot with this stuff because so many of the clients, well, I'm getting shivers, but so many of the clients who come to me have had experiences like you and I have had as kids, but then they've had to put it in a box and ignore it because they either had, parents or family members that were like, we don't talk about that stuff, that's not real, or they had a frightening experience that they weren't able to integrate. And so I'm dealing, with these women, usually women in their like 40s, 50s, 60s plus, who are only now recollecting and integrating these supernatural experiences that they've had. And it's very emotional for them
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, I had this magical experience or I had this spiritual experience, this really profound thing happened to me, but I didn't know what to do with it. And there's so much grief that moves through people. I was thinking about this when you were talking about children being kind of commonly targeted. But that for me anyway, there's a grief because it's like, even if that experience was scary when I was a kid, it was visceral and it was real and it was something that happened to me. And then as you get older, those experiences often lessen. And to me, I register it as an ache, as a lack. It's like, man, I touched something really profound and really transformative and magical. And now I don't have the same access to it. And it like, I don't know. This is where I get really weird. And I'm like, I belong with you guys. Take me back. I don't want to be here. Uh,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know if you can relate to that because I mean, especially with your alien neck guy, that sounds really scary. But
Mhm.
like, do you feel a sense of like sadness that that's not something that you're necessarily accessing as much now as an adult, or no?
Wow, there's like three things I want to like touch on. First of all, I feel like that's why I have so much visceral rage towards the poo-pooers, the people who will like gaslight you if you try to share experiences you've had, because that makes it so much worse, right? If you've had this experience, whether you would think of it as like a positive experience or a negative, that is extremely real to you. So to have people be like dismissive or worse, like imply that there's something wrong with you mentally, like that is like rage inducing for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I think there's like a general sense of like melancholic loss that's probably like coded into all nine-wing ones where like there's this idealism and sadness of how things should be. And for me, it's like very like interpersonal because I have a two fix. Like there's this sadness that people can't just show up and like just like love and accept each other, which sounds really cheesy, but that was like a big grief thing when I was growing up. But yeah, there's always been a longing for me. Um, like when I was a child, I was obsessed with fairy tales, and I loved like, the castles and dragons and Camelot and like all the things that I wanted so much for that to be real. So I'm
Mhm.
like, if we can find any little bits of like magic or the supernatural in this world, like, such a materialistic world, it's so boring to me. I'm just like, why wouldn't you like, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
for me, it's definitely that. But I do think that there's legitimately a lot of evidence out there that people are collecting, like people's stories of like vanishing into thin air. Like, have you seen missing? I think it's called Missing 411 or
Oh, I know of it. Yeah, the one that's predominantly set in national parks, like the national park
Mhm.
disappearance stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Really fascinating stuff. Yeah, these things are still happening. It's just that we now live in a world that's so overwhelmed with information at all times. And, anytime you open your cellular device, you're being bombarded with shit happening all over the world that sometimes these stories like slip through the cracks, but it's happening all the time. And I think people are getting more bold about speaking about it. This is one thing I love about conspiracy theory groups, actually, even though I don't necessarily co-sign every conspiracy theory. Um, I like that there are people out there who are like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to say it with my whole chest, this crazy thing happened to me. I think like the earth is a croissant, like whatever it is, right? Like I'm here for it. I want to hear about it. Like I want to hear why you think that. I might not agree with you, but like let's
Yeah.
talk about it. Um, because I'm very open. I think so much of it is just lens. It's the lens that we're putting on the world. I guess philosophically, I am much more of the belief that perception is 9/10 of the law, in terms of how we're interfacing with reality. I'm not really a materialist by any means. So yeah, I don't know. I think I got waylaid and like didn't really answer your question. And I just rambled for a second, but that's how I feel
No,
about stuff.
you're doing good. I do actually have a question for you. What do you
Hmm.
think these things want?
Mm. I ask myself this frequently. I don't know. Like, I think I think assigning an overarching goal to these beings is probably not the way because I think like no one is a monolith, right? No group is a monolith. So it's probably a mistake to think that whatever these things are, if we're using it as an umbrella term like Bigfoot and fairies and aliens and all of it, there probably isn't one goal.
Hmm.
I like to think that at least some of these beings, the goal is just connection. Um, and to make contact, to learn, to interface in some way. I think we have enough reports from people to know that there is some nefarious agenda with some of these beings. I don't think by far it is not all love and light and joy and happiness. There's some fucked up shit going on there, definitely. Um, Probably not impossible that there's like human experimentation and hybridization going on. I mean, again, it's weird because I talk about this stuff a lot in my own channels and like with my own groups that I curate, and no one who's going to watch this, if they know my work, is going to be like, this is very left field for you, Celeste. They're going to be like, oh no, that makes sense. But at the same time, you don't want to with your whole chest be like, yeah, and I think maybe I'm half alien. No one wants to do that. But I think there's a lot more of us running around that are not entirely from here
Hmm.
as well. And I think that that is probably part of the goal, a goal. Maybe it's calling people home. Maybe it's awakening certain facets of humanity for some galactical political end. I don't know. I know I'm not really down that rabbit hole. I don't know a lot about it, but I know that there are a lot of women on TikTok talking light languages and telling us about the Galactic Federation. I don't really know about it. I just have heard
You know
that
what's
that's
out
going
there.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's out
Yeah.
there. I don't know. What do you think? Do you have thoughts on the purpose, the goal?
Yeah, I mean, mine would probably be a lot more dark, with my Christian worldview.
I love it. Tell me.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're going back to like, the Nephilim and after the flood, they're all like, disembodied spirits and they're not like human or fully spirit, they're like hybrids, right?
Mm,
So I feel like they were doomed to stay here and their goal is to get back into a body.
mm,
So I would assume that if people are seeing aliens in like a flesh form, that's usually like vaguely humanoid, but like, whatever. I think that they could be, having some sort of a breeding program or like manufacturing these bodies for them to wear so they can interact with people.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And I would also like venture to guess that there's like secret meetings going down with like, world leaders and the elites where there might be like exchanges for like tech secrets, which was happening even like in the Book of Enoch, where they were doing like an exchange and giving people these secrets. And yeah, I mean like even with like what the Nazis were doing, I mean, might as well talk about it because why not? With their rocket program and their like extremely innovative weapons that they were developing and even the degree of success that they had early on in the war, like we all could be speaking German right now, you know. I think that there were supernatural things involved, whether it was like aliens, like explicitly, or some other manifestation of like these Nephilim
Yeah,
spirits.
I mean, there's a lot of overlap if you look at the history of politics and the occult. I have a book on my shelf actually that I've never fully read, but a colleague from an old psychic job I had gave it to me, and it's literally called The Occult Roots of Nazism. Like it's a known thing that
Yeah.
there's a lot of that stuff going on. We were talking in Larissa's server a few weeks ago about Jack Parsons, who's the American occultist, he was a follower of Aleister Crowley. He was a Thelemite, and he pioneered the like NASA rocket program. Like we would not be where we are in the history of rocketry in the United States and like space exploration if it weren't for Jack Parsons. The U.S. military likes to pretend he doesn't exist because he was also an insane occultist who
Yeah.
blew himself up, but was also probably assassinated.
Who do you
But you know,
think
like this
who do you think
go
assassinated him?
US government, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
True Nazi.
That's yeah, that's a pretty like broadly accepted theory amongst people who are like Jack Parsons knowers, you know, people who know the lore. And you know, Aleister Crowley, obviously he's not American, he was British, but he was working as a double agent during the war as well. And most people know Aleister Crowley as a very influential occultist.
And
Um,
he was channeling like an alien figure, right?
yep,
Okay.
Lamb. Yep, yep. He went to Egypt with his wife at the time or something, and they did all these. I mean, his major works are received psychic communications from this alien being called Lamb. If you look up the entity, it literally looks like a gray alien with like the gigantic head, etc.
Mhm.
Um, there are streams of Aleister Crowley's occultism that dive more heavily into the ufology stuff. He founded a religion called Thelema, or some people call it Thelema. And that religion is practiced by folks in an organization called the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis. I'm probably mispronouncing that. The OTO. But there's a subsection of the OTO called the Typhonian OTO, and the Typhonian OTO straight up are just like aliens are real, and H.P. Lovecraft probably was like on some shit, and we're gonna actually like worship the beings written about by H.P. Lovecraft and try and interact with them. So there's this weird crossover and all of this stuff between politics, the
Mm.
occult, aliens, and then also fiction
Yeah.
because all this fictional stuff starts intersecting. And like you said earlier, like your fascination as a kid with fairy tales. Um, yeah, like we're gonna have to talk again at a later date because I've been very down the rabbit hole this year of the interesting paranormal phenomena of fictional entities
hmm
manifesting in the real world. Like you mentioned the woman who had the alien abduction experience, but the alien or whatever the being appeared as Ronald McDonald.
Yeah.
You had this experience where the being kind of looked like the E.T. Steven Spielberg figure. Um, there's a there are a lot of reports like that
Yeah.
where seemingly fictional characters appear to people as flesh and blood in interfaceable beings.
hmm
It's I don't know, man. It's a very crazy world, but I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility whatsoever that the powers that be, um, you know, people high up in tech and business and government would be consciously engaging with this. I mean, if you and I are having this Zoom call and we're just like we're just funny little guys. We're like just dudes, talking about this on the internet. Why wouldn't you be interested in this and engaging with it if you were a fucking billionaire?
Yeah.
Like, why would you? You have all the time in the world. You're richer than God. Like, of course, you're going to be like, let me hire an astrologer and see if I can contact a fucking alien. Like, why would you not?
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes sense to me. But, whenever I open my mouth and I say this, like, normal people are like,
No, 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 I get it. It's kind of like the same kind of spirit that led them to create the Tower of Babel, where I
yeah.
think so like I think there were open portals to dimensions back then before God closed them. And like that's how they were going to get to heaven. And it was like a
Mm,
literal threat that they could do it. And I think that same
mm,
spirit exists today in like the technocrats, where they're probably all Enneagram threes and they get to the top of the success heap and they're like, now what? Like, now what are we
yep.
gonna do? They're gonna take on the supernatural. They're gonna do all their weird biohacking shit to try to live to be, live forever, whatever. But kind of like bringing it back to the typology thing, we think that Jack Parsons was probably a seven wing eight. That was a lazy Lich's typing, and I agree. But also, he got hooked up with L. Ron Hubbard. So that
Yes.
brings it even into like modern religion because
Yep.
he was inspired by all this. L. Ron Hubbard was, and he was obviously a science fiction writer, but he was an infamous, the founder of the cult of Scientology.
Hmm.
So this stuff is obviously impacting our world
Hmm.
in like direct ways, having these ripples throughout society.
I think what it boils down to for me and what I've like my work and the book that I'm currently like working on and hoping to get published, the book is about like things that happened to me, but like the wider context is
Mhm.
how powerful storytelling is and how powerful narrative is. Um, and that kind of goes back to like the L. Ron Hubbard thing, like you said. Like, so L. Ron Hubbard's just a dude. He's a businessman. He's a sci-fi writer. He intersects at one point with Jack Parsons. As I understand it, if I recall correctly, that was L. Ron Hubbard's like introduction to the occult. Prior to that, he was just like, I'm a funny little guy writing my little space alien stories. And then he meets Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons is like, oh, I'm into this occult stuff and I'm part of this like weird fringe religion and we're doing all this crazy shit. And the two of them go out into the desert and do this ritual to summon Jack Parsons a girlfriend, which is really a little lame on Jack Parsons' front. Like, just get a girlfriend, bro. It's
Yeah.
not that hard. But if it makes you feel better to jizz in the desert about it, then that's cool. But they they go do this thing called the Babylon working, and it's supposed to summon this woman who's going to the Scarlet Lady, the Scarlet Woman who's going to birth the Antichrist when she has sex with Jack. And I think from memory, this was L. Ron Hubbard's introduction to the idea that this shit might be like in some sense real. And
Hmm.
so he's then inspired and he's like, hey, you know what? This is fascinating. Like this Aleister Crowley guy that you're really into, Jack, like seems like he's really like a mover and a shaker. What if I take my sci-fi novels and I found a religion for funsies?
For fun.
Um,
Yeah.
and here we are, like decades later.
You're back.
Okay. Sorry, I was getting on one about shit talking Scientology and then I got taken out again. So like what have we learned? But no, like all respect to Scientologists. I have my own opinions, but whatever. But it is interesting that this thing that started off as to, I think it would be fair to say to some extent an experiment, right?
Hmm.
Now, not only is it formative to a lot of people's lives and they're drawing a great deal of meaning from it, and I think some people truly are benefiting from it, but people are having genuine experiences and encounters working that system or like engaging with life that way, engaging with spirituality that way. So narrative is phenomenally powerful. The stories we tell, the the ways that we shape reality with our words. And I think that's part of this. And I mean what I try to engage with and what I'm trying as I move into this area or focus a bit more in my work, I'm trying to teach people how to use that because we can all do it. I think it's a human capability, perhaps a spiritual facet of human experience, but storytelling, how we engage with our own narratives, how we engage with the narratives of others. I mean, even with typology, right? Like how many people have you seen have a massive crash out because they had a self-concept, a self-narrative, right, of what type they were, and then they get told something else by the tribe, and then they have a full like existential, like, what is my life? What is reality? I don't understand anymore. It's all story. It's all narrative. So yeah, I don't know. It's a very strange world that we inhabit. But I think, if we want to push back against the perhaps more insidious, nefarious powers that be, whether it's like a shadow government or whatever, I think we have to learn to use those tools. And this is, where you and I might differ a little bit because I know you have, a somewhat different take. But if the powers that be are using, whether it's narrative magic or the occult or whatever, we have to find ways to leverage our own inner power and spirituality to push back against that. Otherwise, we are all at risk of being massively manipulated.
Yeah. That was interesting what you said about the magic of narrative. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. First thing I want to do to that end is like massively plug my acquaintance friend acquaintance. I don't know but there's a person that I am in community with. His name's Joshua Cutchin, and he wrote a book that was published earlier this year called Fourth Wall Phantoms. And it's basically about this. It's about fictional characters or fictional incursions, the phenomena, and the power of story, the power of narrative to shape how reality changes, right? Um, I think humans function on story. We are storytellers by our very nature. Back when we were scrolling shit on cave walls, like that's how we
Wow.
interface, that's how we connect. It's how we make sense of the world is through
Right.
story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that might be why when you're talking about people having paranormal experiences, oftentimes we're getting these reflections of media or reflections of story back to us.
Mm-hmm.
Your experience with the ET thing, right? Like, would you have seen something different if you had never seen ET? If you had no, media consciousness of that kind of entity, would it have shown up differently to you in a different way? It's
Yeah.
story that drives that. And it's the stories that embed themselves in our minds and in our bodies to a certain degree that play out over and over again. This comes back to typology and patterns too. It's the story that we're telling ourselves that we can't shake loose from because it's become patterned to us. Um, I'm like totally galaxy braining now in an ADHD way, and I'm not being linear whatsoever. And I apologize. I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah,
No. Mhm.
narrative as like magical force is something that's really interesting to me.
Wow. I kind of want to do a whole episode on that because that's
You
absolutely
should.
fascinating to me. And I'm kind of reminded by something I heard recently. Some health guy, I can't remember his name, but he said that when people gather around a fire, like our ancestors would have, and you look down at the fire at a certain angle and you have this like little sense of community. It activates stem cell regeneration in your body like crazy. Like it's actually healing you on a cellular level. And I'm like, I feel like
Huh.
we, in our like materialistic world, we've lost touch with a lot of like the primal things that make us human. Like right now, we're gathering around our little like technical fire, talking about the mysteries and wonders of the universe. And it's probably doing something for us on a cellular level to
Mhm.
have like this capacity to share.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm hoping to get more in this podcast specifically, where people who are kind of united over typology stuff. And you're right, like absolutely the narratives we tell ourselves and how I think that, it can be a painful thing to like face yourself or have someone else take like a look at you and like, wow, oh gosh, they're seeing me. But it can be really liberating because once you like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing. you can start recognizing those patterns in real time. And then you can either choose to like accept, like, this is me and I love myself, or wow, this pattern really is not serving me well. Um,
Mhm.
so I just want to thank you so much for being a wonderful, fascinating, beautiful, sparkly guest. And I hope
Thank
that
you.
you can come back, and I will put some links below if you would want to contact Kia for spiritual guidance or a tarot reading. You do all sorts of things, right?
I do spell work, I do tarot. If you just want to, you have an alien problem, bro? You have a demon problem? Let's yap about it, you know? I'm here
Yeah,
for a yap.
yeah.
Thank you for having me. I really loved this was like so great. So I really appreciate you.
The first of many. The first of
Yes.
many.
Yeah, we'll be
Yeah.
back.
All right. Bye, guys.